The Supporters Direct Scotland Index is a piece of work that started about 8 years ago, and it came out with from conversations with the Scottish Football Association, Scottish Professional Football League, Sports Scotland, Scottish Government, and ourselves at Supporters Direct Scotland. So the SDS Index measures a club's ownership, its approach to fan engagement, and some degree of transparency. And we came up with a short number of measures for the engagement and transparency that says, well, these would be good things for clubs to do. On engagement, there are things that are quite easy to do in terms of the way that the clubs run. On transparency, there are things that are easy to do, but on some of them, clubs do them. Most clubs do them, and on some of them, no clubs do them. So we asked the clubs publish who their directors are on their website, and I think every single club in Scotland, or almost every single club in Scotland, does that. One of the other requirements is, do they publish details of the board meetings that those directors have? And none of them do. So there's 3 or 4 things that we measure, simple things that we measure on transparency and also on engagement to see how the club runs. The larger part of the index is around the ownership of clubs. So we look at every one of the 42 clubs in the SPFL, also the 18 clubs in the Highland League and the 16 clubs in the Lowland League. I say 16 because there's a couple of B teams from Celtic and Hearts that are in there as well. So they have the same ownership structure as the senior club. But we look at those, so 76 clubs in total, and also the 20 clubs in the Scottish Women's Professional League, and look at how they're owned. So across all of them, we monitor changes to ownership. We publish in a fairly simple format who the main shareholders, typically people owning more than 5% of the shares, are. As that changes and as those changes are reported to Companies House, we go and check that information is there, and we provide that summary. One of the challenges in that is a bit of a time lag. So after there's a change of ownership, it takes sometimes months, sometimes as much as a year for that information to filter through to Companies House. And the other challenge is that things are sometimes reported as change of ownerships that don't actually happen or look quite different than they are. So media headlines are generally quite simple. Companies House is a little bit duller and a little more complex at times. But we take the role of monitoring that so that you don't have to. We do that work on an ongoing basis. It took a long time to set that up, but now we're really monitoring. Well, if you look at the SPFL, Highland League, Lowland League, and SWPL, it's less than 100 clubs that we're looking at. So we have an alert system. So when something changes at Companies House, we go and check, what it says and summarise that and report that. So it's a place that you can go on the Supporters Direct Scotland website just to see at a glance who it is that owns your club. I think the big thing about transparency is that it's okay when you've got good owners. You don't really need to think about that too much. But when you have owners, either bad owners or good owners who are doing a bad job, they may not want to share everything that's going on at their club. So there may be a problem that they don't want anybody to know about, either through embarrassment or because they're actually trying to do something bad, which is pretty rare in Scottish football anyway. It's not unknown though. So what we would like to have is just a simple way of finding out who runs our clubs and what their background is and what are they doing. We've found most of our clubs you can identify who the ultimate owner is. There are a couple of exceptions to that, and for several years, one of those exceptions, the exceptions are generally clubs that are owned in offshore tax havens, and one of the clubs that was owned in an offshore tax haven is now in administration. We couldn't say exactly who the owner was, so we didn't know if they were a good person, a bad person, if they were able to fulfill on their promises and keep that club running sustainably and competitively in football or not, because we simply didn't know who they were. And a few years down the line, they found themselves in administration. So that's really why we're doing that. That's why we think transparency is so important. The biggest threat, I would say, to football clubs, other than relegation and rapidly falling down the league pyramid, the biggest threat outside of that to football clubs is when there's a change of ownership. And unless you know who the owners are, and unless you know why they've invested in your club, you really don't know whether you should be worried or not. And they'll all tell you they want great things for your club, and they're going to do this, that, and the next thing, and you're going to be, thriving, and everything's going to be great. But not every club can win the league. Not every club can get promoted each season. So a lot of them are going to be disappointed. And some of them, when faced with that disappointment, will throw good money after bad in order to get a short-term return. So we want to know that that's happening and be able to say, well, okay, that's what's happening. Should we worry about it or shouldn't we worry about it? And that's the third strand of the index on engagement is, are the fans in conversation with the people owning and running their clubs to talk about those things, to share in the success, but also share some responsibility or be part of fixing things or keeping things on an even keel when things aren't going so well. So it's a very simple system that we have. It's on the Supporters Direct Scotland website, and in there there's a section on research, and in there you'll find a tab for the SDS Scotland Index, and within that a tab for each division, and within that a page for each club. And it says those questions that we ask about engagement and transparency are answered, and that high level picture, it's a simple bar chart of the main owners in the club is right beneath it. On there, we've also got links to Companies House. So if you want to delve and find out who the minority shareholders are, or if you want to find a set of accounts, you can do that through Companies House. So it brings everything into one place. And for some clubs, that's quite difficult just to find them on Companies House, because they may have a complex ownership structure or a company structure where they have a holding company and the football club itself. Some of them have up to 4 companies within the structure to find all 4 of them. Or you may search for the company at the club on Companies House and find its associated charity or a community club with a very similar name to it. So actually just getting to the right page is a challenge in itself. So we've taken that work away from people, from individuals and put it there. So it's the one-stop shop to find your source of information about football clubs. And we have some ambitions to add more to that over the coming years. I would love to have an overview of the club's financial health on there. It's difficult to do, time-consuming to do, and so many of our clubs are tiny. They're literally called micro entities on Companies House and on their accounts, so they don't have to share very much detail there because they're such small businesses. But if we could get some measure of financial health on there as well, that would be my fourth strand that I would want to add to the index. Well, one of the biggest benefits from that has been to myself. So I'm the chair of the Raith Rovers Supporters Trust, and before we built the index, I did a bit of work at Raith Rovers about our ownership structure. So I'd been running it for about 5 years. Ours is the one with 4 different companies in the structure, one of the more complex ones in Scottish football. And for years and years and years, every Saturday at home matches, I would stand at the trust table to talk to our members and fans in general. And the most common question I got asked was, so who's it that owns our club? And I kind of knew it in my head, so I'd kind of describe it to them and I'd see them glazing over. So we started, sharing at our trust AGM, a picture of it with pie charts on it to show people what it was. And because it's quite a complex picture with 4 pie charts, I tried to combine them together and people were still glazing over. But eventually, after a while, people stopped asking me that question because they knew it's on there on the pie charts and they just need to sit there with a cold towel on their head and think about it for a little while, read the pie charts and understand them. So the advantage to me was nobody asked me who owns our club because we all know who owns the club. So that's great. And you don't want your attention to be taken up with a question as simple as who owns the club. You want your attention to be on how can I help my club? What are our priorities? What can we do together? And questions like, are we going to win today?